with a knife video for you. Today we've got a review of the Bestech Bison, and this is a Bestech that I think is going to be fairly popular. A number of people have already commented on these in terms of reviews, but I think this is well done. And I've got to say, I've often pointed out that Bestech does a great job with their action. And if you want a decent or even a good action at a pretty budget-friendly price point, these are a great place to find it. But often I don't love their designs. This one, however, is just really, really nice. It's just kind of plain, and I could see this being broadly appealing as just a fairly simple design, very well built by Bestech. I will say these land in an interesting spot. We've had lots of budget-friendly Bestechs on the channel. We've had a few of the higher-end pieces. I enjoy all of them. These kind of land in the middle. Okay, so there's tons of Bestechs that are like 40 to 50 bucks. There's tons of Bestechs that are $200 and maybe just right around that, like 180 to 220, let's say. But this one comes in about $110, I want to say, and so it's kind of in this middle ground. And I think that's a nice place for Bestech to at least make sure they've got a couple of offerings. And they do have now, they're beginning, I guess, to have a few knives that are $80 to $110 or something like that. And this falls into that category. And the materials reflect that. So we've got titanium on the frame lock here. We've got a D2 blade. And then we've got G10 over here. So you can sort of see there's like this conglomeration of higher end and more budget materials. By the way, if you do want to pick one of these up, go over to White Mountain Knives, use my discount code SHARPSTUFF, and you can save yourself 10%. So that'll, make it $100. I think they're $110. So, 10% would be like $10 off. So that might be a good option for you if you want to do that. It does help the channel, so it becomes sort of a win-win situation for everybody. Okay, let's get into the size and weight on this guy. So this is a pretty nicely sized knife, 8 3/8 inches overall. The blade on this guy is 3 5/8. 4 13/16 on the handle. So that's when the knife is closed. This measurement here is just over 4 3/4. 3 3/4 inches of grip area. Okay, so pretty generous there. Lots of room even for a fairly large hand. And that doesn't count the very generous choil up here at the front. And finally, for what I would call a reasonably large knife, this guy only weighs 4.3 ounces, so pretty comfortable in terms of size, weight, and carry. I think this is one of the things that can definitely be a selling feature of this knife is you get quite a lot of knife and it's not overly onerous to have in your pocket and with you all the time. All right, this particular one, by the way, is black wash on the blade, black G10. There are a number of color variants, so again, you can go over to White Mountain Knives. I think they have a few in stock, although I hesitate to say that because it seems like every time I do, they suddenly sell out. But last I checked, they had a few in stock and they have a bunch of different colors. So you've got some options there. And I think you can do like satin or black on the blade. All right, so let's take a close look at this blade. We've got this D2 blade with sort of a black wash finish on it. Very high flat grind with a bit of a swedge. I like that with the swedge, they didn't remove everything because with that choil, you want to have that option to put your thumb up here. And there's enough material left that it's actually still pretty comfortable to do that. So that I think is important to make note of. We've got this sort of circular plunge grind here, which I'm not always a fan of, but in this particular configuration, it looks pretty good. And it sort of, matches with what's going on the blade here. So I'm pretty happy with that. It's good and thin behind the edge. And so in terms of a cutting tool, yeah, I think this is pretty well done. The coating is going to help a little bit with the D2 steel. The only problem with black coatings, and I say this all the time, generally I avoid them because of the fact that, well, they can look kind of cool. They don't look cool for long. They tend to, in my experience anyway, show wear worse than other finishes. So I would rather see a stonewash finish or a satin finish, generally speaking, on a blade. Black wash finishes, black DLC, and bead blasted finishes are going to show wear much more readily than those other two options. And so for that reason, I tend to be drawn to either a stonewash or a satin finish. But this looks really nice. Just know that if you buy this, even though it's going to hold up well, and it's certainly held up really well for me, eventually even this is going to start showing wear. Certainly the stonewashing over this helps a lot, okay, and it does make a difference. So it's going to be better than, say, a straight DLC coating, but it's not going to be as good as a satin coat. Anyway, in terms of performance on this blade, yeah, it's a good cutting tool. It's thin enough behind the edge. It's fairly well balanced in terms of keeping some strength out here. The flat grind and the swedge here make it, balanced in terms of that. The edges, the tip, I'm sorry, is pretty fine. So you're not going to want to go dropping this tip down onto a concrete floor. You're going to break it for sure. You certainly don't want to go prying with it. That's never a good idea with the tip of pretty much any knife. But this should do quite a good job for most people's cutting needs. Certainly, it served me very well. Moving on to the action, I have to say, like most Bestechs, the action on this guy is pretty good. The flipper tab is accessible, it's comfortable, the detent is nice and snappy, which I like to see. The lock bar, again, is accessible. When I go to deploy it, when I go to unlock the knife, it's easy to do. I don't feel uncomfortable. I don't feel like I'm trying to jam my thumb into somewhere where it's hard to get. So yeah, overall, really, really nice. I will say one thing I did to this knife that you'll probably want to keep in mind. If you buy it and you go, Kevin, the action is not nearly as good as you described, I oiled the detent path on this knife. I found the detent ball and just that little bit of lock bar tension was enough to slow down the performance. Okay, so when I first got it, this wouldn't drop shut the way it does now. So you see how I can just shake it a little bit and it shuts? It wouldn't do that until I put a little bit of oil on the detent path and just smooth that out just a little. All right, so that was something that, that's something that if you buy one of these, you may have to do for yourself, and just to kind of keep in mind if you're not getting the same good performance that I'm getting. All right, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with the action. In fact, I'm more than pretty happy. I enjoy this action quite a lot because of just how nice and snappy it is. Moving on to the handle, we've got titanium and G10 milled titanium clip. Again, the black wash finish is carried over to this titanium, as we would expect at just about for most titanium frame locks these days. We've got a hardened steel lock bar insert. One thing that's interesting, so we've got a titanium backspacer, but I want to show you something kind of cool. You can see it really well right there. See that line that's running inside the handle? So they've done a stainless steel liner nested into the G10, but it's not a full liner. It's just enough so it goes around the pivot and then back here to the backspacer. So it's just enough to give metal where they need metal for the screws and for the construction of the knife, and that's it. I like that as an option. One, it gives that little bit of extra strength and makes sure that your screws are screwing into metal, which is what we want, but it doesn't add, but it adds as little weight as possible. Let's put it that way. So I really, really like that approach. And you don't see it an awful lot. So I think Bestech has done a really, really good job with making that choice in terms of their construction. In terms of ergonomics, so the construction I'm very, very pleased with. Ergonomics, I'm also very pleased with. It feels very comfortable, very natural in a standard saber grip. A hammer grip is okay, but not quite as good. Generally, that's the case anyway. And then you do have this nice generous choil, which allows you to choke up. And I like that, again, quite a lot. I can see how not everyone would want that choil, or at least not want it that big. And I could see, you could get almost another 1/4 inch of cutting edge here and still have a fairly generous finger choil. So I can definitely see how someone would say maybe that choil is a little bit too big, but I don't know. In use, I find it works really, really well. And there's the added safety of not ever having to worry about cutting yourself there. So I do like that choil in its location and as it's placed there now. Yeah, so in hand, I find it very, very comfortable. I like the handle construction a lot. I like the blade quite a bit. I'm not in love with the coating, but there you go. So let's get to some comparisons. First up, I'm going to throw a Rat Model 1 in here, mostly because everyone is familiar with that knife, and it's just, lots and lots of people are going to be able to sort of go, okay, I get the size now. Let's throw a Spyderco Amalgam in here just because it's, kind of a similar vein knife. It's a budget knife with some higher end, or it's a knife that's increased in price by having some higher end touches. There's one knife that I really want to compare. This is not it. This is the Wee Knives Malice. Just happens to be here, but I thought I'd bring it in just to sort of show another overseas option, as well as, to point out that, this is sort of at that, this is almost $300 price point, but this is what you'd be getting for, $200 to $250, where, this is coming in at about $100. The big knife here that I want to compare is this guy right here. This is the Civivi Insight, almost forgot the name of it there. And Civivi is competing just about directly with Bestech for sort of the higher end, well finished, but still reasonably priced knife category. Okay, and that seems overly specific, I know, but there is, this is a pretty hot area of the market right now. A lot of people want something that is just extremely well built, but they don't want to pay a lot for it. And Civivi is really, really delivering that. There's been a bunch of Civivi models that have been very popular, and I think they've gotten a bit more love than Bestech, even though I would say Bestech is doing about equivalent. Okay, Civivi might be just a hair nicer, but also you're going to pay for that extra, fit and finish. And so anyway, I think these guys are, really going head to head right now. There's some significant differences here. Okay, this is a liner lock. I do like the material on this guy, but I can see a lot of people who would be looking at this or this considering the alternative. I think this comes in around $80. This comes in around $100. So even the price point is pretty similar. Are they comparable? Yes, but they're still quite a bit different. Obviously, the titanium is going to make a difference. Both of these, I believe, just let me double check for you guys. I think they both have D2 steel. Anyway, we're going with that. So both of these have D2 steel, which does present some of its own challenges. The coating is going to help with this not maybe being quite such a problem in terms of corrosion. All right, flip this guy back over so you can take another look at the lock side while we're wrapping things up here. So, I think this is another well done folder from Bestech. Okay, they've done a good job. The construction is nice. This is an enjoyable knife to use, enjoyable knife to carry. It flips really well. The action is very, very comfortable. Everything that I want this knife to do, it just does it. Okay, so that's when I'm looking at a knife for review and I'm sort of thinking about the boxes that it checks and checking out how it functions and thinking, in use, hey, what's going to happen here over, prolonged periods of time? And when I take it out to use it, I just expect all the things to work. And in this knife, it really, really does. Add to that the fact that this design is pretty tame, okay? Compared to some of the Bestechs out there, there are some models from Bestech that I would say I find pretty ugly, but this one I don't. I think this is pretty attractive, and it's available in a number of different colors. So overall, I think this is a win for Bestech. I can see this being pretty popular for them. And if you like this design and if you like the kind of action and stuff like that I've described in this video, I would easily recommend this. And of course, just a reminder again, get one from White Mountain Knives. Use my discount code SHARPSTUFF, and that does help out the channel. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.